the first thing I wanted to talk about was, I guess, breaking news as of this afternoon, because I saw a headline that suggests the false. It almost reads like a bad New York Times headline, because the New York Times is infamous rather, for having these false equivalencies. And this is the headline they posted sometime today. Here you go. Pope says both Trump and Harris are against life. So basically, Pope Francis was coming back from a long trip, and reporters got to ask him questions over just throwing questions at Pope Francis. And someone asked him if he had any thoughts about the US elections. And, who's the Pope if not someone who has thoughts on everything? And look, no one expects the Pope to be like a political pundit. But if you're the head of the Catholic Church, you are regularly seen as a moral authority, definitely by people who are part of the church. And I think by extension, people, even if you're not a member of the Catholic Church, it's like, well, it's the Pope. He must be a good guy, right? So he basically said that US voters should choose between the quote, lesser of two evils, which is not necessarily a horrible thing to say, except that the Pope meant to imply that both candidates are evil. And specifically, they were evil on the only issues he seems to care about. So this is from the New York Times article right here. The very both sides thing to do here. Sending migrants away, not allowing them to grow, not letting them have life is something wrong. It is cruelty. He's right. Trump is horrible when it comes to sending migrants away and separating families and all that. And then what does he add right after that? Sending a child away from the womb of the mother is murder because there is life. And we must speak clearly about these things. So, according to the Pope, Donald Trump being totally racist against, like, honestly, legal migrants, more on that in a second. Trump's racist attacks against migrants, his hatred of refugees, immigrants, whether they're here legally or illegally, he doesn't know the difference. That is on par with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz saying, we think women should have health care. And we think if they want to have an abortion, it's between them and their doctors and not like Ted Cruz. The Pope says those are the same. And then the Pope went on to say this. Here we go. When asked whether it would be morally admissible to vote for someone who favored the right to abortion, he responded, one must vote and one must choose the lesser evil. Which is the lesser evil? That lady or that gentleman? I don't know. Each person must think and decide according to his or her own conscience. Yeah, who's evil here? Is it Kamala Harris? Is it Donald Trump? Who can say? Who can make a decision when it comes to the easiest moral dilemma you will ever face? The Pope is like, I don't know. I assume they are both equally horrible. Like, how busted is your moral barometer when you don't know the difference between maybe a paper cut and a decapitation? Like, it wasn't even like it was totally an ad-libbed moment. I know he was just asked the question during a little scrum, but it's not like he hasn't put any thought into this. He clearly knew that they have positions on these issues, but he offered the sort of cowardly moral ambiguity we've come to expect from the highest ranking Catholic official. Because what have we learned from Catholic officials over the years? They routinely treat Democrats as monsters because they think women ought to have rights. This became an issue early in Joe Biden's presidency, too. This is another headline from the Times. Why do some Catholic bishops want to deny Joe Biden communion? It's because despite Joe Biden's Catholicism, he said, I'm pro-choice when it comes to policy. And some of these conservative bishops are like, well, then we're not giving you a consecrated cracker. How are you going to be? You don't like that, do you? And that's supposed to be their method of punishment. But look, let's be very clear on this. It is not hard to know who the lesser evil is. Democrats, by and large, support women's rights. They oppose gun violence. They followed the science as best they could during the pandemic. They want to expand healthcare for as many people as possible. What's the Republican position on those types of issues? They want to force rape and incest victims, including children, to bear their attackers' kids. They only offer thoughts and prayers after mass shootings while doing absolutely nothing to get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. They oppose life saving vaccines. They push conspiracy theories that have led to more COVID-19 related deaths. So, if you're talking about life and that's what matters to you, there is one party that is eagerly pushing some people to die more quickly. Like, literally, as I am saying this to you, the big controversy today in politics is that the leader of the Republican Party and his running mate are pushing a debunked conspiracy theory about Haitian immigrants in a city in Ohio that has already led to serious bomb threats. All because they know their lies will rile up their ignorant racist base. So, like, one side revels in that evil. Evil is their base. They need to capitulate to those voters. The other side, the Democrats, listen, they are far from perfect. They frequently deserve criticism. No one despises Democrats more than other Democrats. But they work to oppose evil, at least in those areas. Like, it takes religion to pretend like there are no obvious differences. And look, maybe the Pope's words would carry a little more weight if he focused on how Democrats are dealing with Israel and Gaza and how they are letting the Israeli government commit a genocide against Palestinians. Okay, then we could talk about Democrats being evil. Not that Republicans are any better on that issue, but okay, I kind of get your point at that point. But he never did that. The Pope just offered meaningless platitudes about, like, war is bad, but you know what's also bad? Healthcare. When it came to the political parties, he boiled it down to, and I'm quoting here, both are against life. The one that throws out migrants and the one that kills children. Like, yes, one side does hate migrants. You are half right. The other side does not, by definition, kill children. They also don't kill toddlers. They also don't kill babies. To say otherwise is to completely misunderstand why anyone might have an abortion so close to giving birth and why some newborns die shortly after birth in the what Republicans have called, like, post-birth abortion or some lies like that. You don't understand why that's happening. It is certainly not because someone gives birth and says, "No, don't want the kid, let's murder it." It's not how it works. Also, if you're already in, like, your 9th month of pregnancy, you are planning to have the child. The only possible reason you will ever see for why someone wants an abortion in, like, the 9th month, 8th month, is because something horrible has gone wrong with the fetus. Like, no one's doing this for fun. So I'm not expecting the Pope to understand that. I'm not expecting the Pope to understand, like, women's anatomy in general. But in order for his comments to make any sense that both sides are evil here, you have to share both this warped belief that life begins at conception and a warped belief that all sins are all the same. And then you have to treat your brain like an etch-a-sketch and just erase everything that happened between, like, 2016 and 2020, and also January 6, 2021. Like, it is so bizarre to me that the Catholic Church has moved vaguely, they've moved slightly more progressively when it comes to letting priests bless same-sex couples. They've also said this. They have said priests can baptize trans people. Like, they have taken baby steps in the right direction on some issues that you did not expect the Catholic Church to move left on about anything. And yet they are, and by the way, they're also very good when it comes to condemning war, condemning torture, condemning the death penalty. Catholic Church is great on that. But it refuses to budge on, like, women in leadership roles in the church and also idolizing sperm. Sorry, they're not moving on that one at all. One thing I find really ironic, earlier this year, the Pope released a document where he reaffirmed his opposition to abortion. He actually called it, quote, an extremely dangerous crisis of the moral sense. And in the same document, he condemned violence against women, which good, but also when you're forcing a woman to give birth against her will, that's a form of violence against women. Do you not understand that? Does the Catholic Church not get that? I don't know. Anyway, none of this is really surprising. I don't know how many of you remember this, but in 2019, the very same Pope said this about abortion. He says abortion, even of a sick fetus, is like hiring a hitman. The Pope compared women who have abortions to trained assassins. Like, he's never been good on this issue. He's never been empathetic on this matter. And that allegation was especially absurd when you consider how naturally occurring miscarriages also result in what Catholics would call the death of a fetus. So, by their logic, I guess God runs the mafia or something. It is also hard to take the Pope seriously when he speaks about the sacredness of human life, when he oversees the largest criminal enterprise in the world. They are responsible for sexually abusing or covering up the sexual abuse of thousands upon thousands of child victims. There are, scandals and corpses associated with the Magdalene laundries. Google that if you've never done it before. Then you have the irrational bans on birth control and other forms of contraception. Like, abortion is not really their problem. Sex is their problem. So if Pope Francis thinks abortion is murder and pro choice policies are on par with the anti migrant cruelty of the Trump administration, then I would expect the Pope to start promoting sex education, birth control, condoms, everything else the Catholic Church currently opposes that would actually reduce the number of abortions people need. And, when the refugee family separation crisis was happening during the Trump administration, the Pope rightly called it out. He actually said at the time, check out this headline from a couple years ago, 2020. Pope Francis calls Trump's family separation border policy cruelty of the highest order, cruelty of the highest form. Yes, it was cruel. He was right to call it out. I appreciate that the Pope called it out. But at the same time, there is no equivalence between that actual evil and this pretend boogeyman of letting women control their bodies. Like, there was a time when the Pope said the lives of the poor, the living, the destitute, the abandoned, and the underprivileged were equally sacred. It seems very clear now he was lying when he said that. He is only concerned about the unborn, even though Democrats' policies for the least of these and all those other people he used to care about are far better than their opponents. He's like, yeah, sure, Democrats are better for all the marginalized people that I supposedly talk about, but also they think women should control their bodies. So, Kamala, Trump, well, what's the difference? Lesser of two evils, you decide. I don't know. Like, Jesus Christ, how messed up do you have to be? I will say there's a group called Catholics for Choice. We won't get into it, but they exist. But Catholics for Choice put out a statement today saying, and I'm quoting here, to distill voters' choice down to abortion or immigration is categorically wrong. Catholic voters would do well to follow Pope Francis's prior advice, which is to care about the least of these, rather than his present advice, and evaluate all candidates based on a justice-minded view of the world that looks beyond a singular issue. So they're right about that, of course. It is bad enough that some voters only care about a single issue because it means they're willing to let the world burn unless they get everything they want. But I wonder if it's arguably worse when you only care about a couple of issues and then you throw your hands up in defeat while acting like both parties are the same. They are not. They are objectively different. One is better than the other on all these particular topics. And to pretend otherwise requires a heavy dose of delusion. And the Pope is very good at that. This is the same week when Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And I doubt Taylor Swift agrees with Kamala Harris on all the issues. I don't know. She's not that political. But she knew there's a clear difference between the two candidates when it comes to who's going to be better overall on the issues that matter to her. And it is amazing to me that the childless cat lady had more courage and knew how to say it in more nuance than the Pope could today by just saying, they're both kind of the same. They're both horrible. You should vote, but who am I to decide what you do with it? Just utter cowardice on the Pope's part. I'm going to stop there for a bit. What questions do we have here before I move on to the next thing? Pope does nothing, just sits around in a robe and makes noise. Not a state leader, but somehow given that status. Sometimes the Pope puts out, or at least the Catholic Church puts out in his name, these documents saying, here's where the Catholic Church stands on certain issues. And they might be okay. I wish Catholics cared about it as much as, I do. But at the same time, if you have the sort of power that the Pope has, I say this about politicians all the time too. Like, if you have this much power and you're not using it to make people's lives better, what the hell are you doing? What's the point of amassing that much power or getting elected to that much power if you're not going to do anything with it? Anyway, that part bothers me. Sorry, I'm making a little note to myself for later. What other questions we got? It's worth noting that most Catholics actually support abortion rights. That is what I was writing a second ago. There's a complete disconnect between church members and the priesthood. This is true. I wanted to pull up these numbers. I'm sorry I don't have them on me. But by and large, in the United States, people who call themselves Catholics are pretty good when it comes to supporting abortion rights. The Catholic Church says no, absolutely not in any way. You're literally a fetus that deserves protection like 18 months before you were born. But run of the mill Catholics, the ones who attend church, they're generally fine when it comes to abortion rights. They support they support laws that support abortion, even if they may not personally want it. They're also good about like same-sex marriage and things like that. So Catholics are way better than the Catholic Church. I want people to remember that. This is not backlash against Catholics. I'm mad at the Pope. I'm mad at the Catholic Church as an institution. Any other questions there? If the Pope wants to reduce each party's candidate to one issue where he doesn't like their stances, then we get to reduce the entire Catholic Church to one issue, and you know exactly what I mean. No kidding. At least in the Catholic Church's case, like, if you want to boil it down to sexual abuse and how they're handling it, like, it would be very easy to talk about evil and how you're responding to that. It boggles my mind that this guy is reducing a party whose entire existence seems to be to clean up the mess of the other party down to one issue that you already disagree with them about, meaning there's no way to bridge the gap there. And then just nothing else matters to you. Like, if that discourages some Catholics from voting for a Democrat, what a disservice that would be from the Pope, and very irresponsible on his part. The entire prescription against abortion of the Christian is BS. The Old Testament indicates that life occurs after birth when God breathes life into a child. And as people know from the Old Testament, God loves nothing more as a hobby than to just murder as many people as possible. Need a big flood? He's got you covered. Want to kill a bunch of children who made fun of a bald dude and let bears maul the kids? Sure, why not? Like, God loves killing people. That's one of the, if you search all my videos, one of the most popular is all the people God has killed.